What's up, guys? This is Pedro from my Stuttering Life, where you will hear the good, the bad, the very ugly. We're gonna laugh, we are gonna cry, but through it all, just know you are not alone. So, let's get started. This is episode 28, and my featured guest is Mr. Rama Siva. Mr. Siva is located in the UK and worked at the Prime Minister's office in London, serving Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. He is the author of Dreaming of Stuttering Freedom, the Stuttering Mind series, Book 1. Mr. Siva has also contributed to BBC Radio in the United Kingdom and has a successful social media presence. I am honored to have Mr. Siva as a guest with me on my Stuttering Life. Welcome, Mr. Siva.
Hi, Pedro. Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. This is my honor and privilege. We have a lot of topics to cover, so let's get started. Do you remember when you first began to stutter?
Well, Pedro, that's an interesting question. Apparently, since the age of 3 or 4, I used to stumble, just like many toddlers do, when speaking. And I don't remember any instances when I was that young as a toddler. But when I was 7 or 8 years of age at primary school, I was reading out aloud in class, and I was stumbling over my words and hesitating. And that was a moment the teacher sent me direct to the speech therapy jail, where I was stuck for over 30 years. It's only been in the last 2 or 3 years that I have fully accepted myself, and I'm perfectly happy with the way that I communicate. So from that age of 8 until around 40 years of age, I would be forever preoccupied about my speech, about not wanting to stutter and not wanting to block. And in the end, I didn't do anything with my life. I avoided a lot of situations, and that really affected me, not in terms of my professional life, but in my personal life, my social life, in fact, every other area apart from my job. However, I was not as well paid doing the same job as my other colleagues. And it wasn't due to the stutter, it was due to my holding back personality. As a person who stuttered, I wouldn't say boo to a goose. I would be so preoccupied with the opinions of others that I wouldn't even provoke a fight or provoke a discussion, because I didn't want to be looked down at or laughed at.
Right. Yes, sir. Does it run in the family? Does anyone else stutter in your family?
Well, that's a great question. It was only at the age of 15 that I met my cousin, my first cousin, that is my dad's sister's son, and he stuttered. And I met him when he was in his 40s or 50s. There's quite a gap in our age. His son also stutters. So those are the only two.
You were talking about speech therapy in primary school, and you referred to it as speech therapy jail. Can you talk about that more?
Yes. So unfortunately, the teacher unconsciously labeled me as a stutterer, and I unconsciously took on that label for the rest of my life. And to be honest, speech was great. I really enjoyed the time I spent with my mom, and the speech therapist who was there. She was very kind and very helpful. So there was no really any incentive for me to overcome this speaking way of stuttering. So I had speech therapy from the age of 8 on and off until I was 18. And at the age of 18, I met other male stutterers who stuttered quite considerably. So it was my belief that I would stutter forever because they were much older than I was. And at the age of 25, I joined a speech therapy program run by recovering stutterers. And while I was there, I met other people again from the age of 12 until the 60s, 70s, and they were always having to work on their speech, meaning they had to do contacts, they had to pick up the phone, they had to do breathing every day for 20 minutes. They really had to work on their speech. So it was my belief that I had to work on my speech forever. And unfortunately, when I was working at the British Embassy in Washington, D.C. in 2009, the stutter held me at gunpoint. I was so ashamed of myself and the way I spoke in the team meeting that I really didn't know what to do because I was doing everything what they told me to do, which was to breathe in the mornings for 20 minutes, make a few calls, make a few contacts. What I didn't realize was I had to build the inner confidence within me to be able to have confidence in my speech, or rather in my ability to speak, rather than just waiting for the breathing and other mechanisms I used to calm myself down. That was a mistake which I had made in the previous years. I had focused so much on the technique, the breathing, the pull-outs, the prolongations, and the emphasize the first sound, the taking your time and speaking when you're ready. So I was more focused on the physical aspect of speaking rather than building my confidence, which I have over the last 5 years. And so, in answer to your question, speech therapy was helpful in terms of helping me to control the physical aspects of speaking. But Pedro, what I really needed to do was to work on the low confidence, low self-esteem, and the many, many limiting beliefs that I had about myself.
We actually have similar backgrounds. I am hearing your story, and in my mind, I'm reliving memories as I'm hearing your story, and they are very similar due to in school my stuttering was caused by a dog attack when I was 5 years old. Prior to the dog attack, I had regular speech, but after the dog attack, due to the shock and trauma, I could not speak, and so my parents put me in speech therapy. So I had speech therapy all through school, and then I had it after high school. And when I joined the military, I furthered my speech therapy, although I added hypnosis. But what struck me growing up is that I thought I was the only one in the world who stuttered. Feeling completely alone, completely isolated from everybody else, because in school, nobody wanted to hang out with the kid who couldn't talk, who sputtered and stammered and would spit and hiss. And so during my school years, I was very much alone until high school. That's a whole different story that we will cover later. But I did not meet another person who stuttered until I was 20 years old. And that meeting was truly, it was remarkable. I could not say my name, and
Mm,
he could not say his name, but I could f- feel everything that he was feeling. I felt the anxiety. I felt the block. I felt the pressure, felt the
mm,
tension. And after a long pause, we
mm.
both said our names at the same time. So, growing up, I thought that I was the only person who st- stuttered, and so being labeled as a person who stutters, I was told that I could not do many things in 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 life until I got older, and then everything changed. But I
Mm.
want to talk about, how was your high school experience as a st- stutterer?
Oh, Pedro, my high school experience was very traumatic. Like you mentioned, you met someone when you were 20. I met other stutterers in the speech therapy arena, but it was only when I was around 14 when I met another teenage stutterer, also from Sri Lanka. And when he met me, he started laughing because he himself had never met another stutterer before. So for me, having that experience was bizarre because I had met other stutterers in speech therapy, but that guy was laughing, 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 laughing. I guess he was relieved that he wasn't the only one in the whole wide world of Sri Lankan Tamil people that stuttered. So in high school, I was a loner. I had friends, but like many people who stutter, I started to withdraw myself into the shell and I stopped talking, I stopped communicating with people because I was so self conscious about my speech. And that resulted in not doing a lot of things. And for example, when people invited me out, I would decline because I just didn't want to go and embarrass myself. So I was more of the person that wanted to hide the fact that I stuttered. One of the things which I've learned in the last 5 years is that the more I try to hide the stutter, the more I would stutter. By actually consciously choosing to speak like this, where you are proactively sharing your secret with the world, that you have a communication issue sometimes. Not all the time, Pedro, because if you read my book, you will hear about the story of when the stuttering boy dropped a cat in the well. As the song goes, ding dong bell, pussy in the well. I could sing, I could speak to my cat without stuttering. But when I was talking to another adult human being, I would freeze and I just couldn't speak. And the same goes with my friends. I would just try and speak, but the words wouldn't come out. And you know what, Pedro? What is really amazing? I've written two great books, and these are feedback I've got from people who have bought them. Not feedback that I've told people to buy them, but I get feedback from people who have who have actually bought them from Amazon, and they're telling me it's really great. And you know what? In English class, I got a D. So it was my belief that I couldn't write. So these are all things which happened in high school. Fortunately, I got enough grades and I went to college and went to university and I studied economics. But once again, I couldn't do any presentations. When it was my time to do a presentation, I wouldn't be in class. I would take a day off, or I would ask someone else to do the presentation. I would move the mouse on the screen and look pretty. I avoided a lot of situations in my life.
Wow. We have such similar backgrounds, Mr. Siva, because let me tell you, all through school, all through college, I missed the first 2 days because you have to give, well, you have to stand up
Mm,
and give you an and you have to give an introduction. When I first did it back in grade school, oh, it was horrible. My heart was hurting. I could see everyone making faces and
mm,
laughing, mocking. And so from that day on, how I dealt with it, how I coped is I would miss the first 2 days all through school, and then
mm.
all through 6 years of college. I missed the
Mm.
first 2 days. And in presentations, let me tell you, Mr. Siva, I learned all about IT. I learned about computers and PowerPoint. And so what
Mm.
I would do is in college, we would have to give presentations in 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 group projects. Once we picked our groups, I would be the first one to tell my group that I will do all of the PowerPoint work if y'all talk. because because I knew that if I was to speak, it would just be horrific. It would be just traumatic. So to to have it resolved, I would just tell them that I would do all of the PowerPoint work, and they all agreed extremely quickly,
Mm.
which actually helped me out. But presentations are when all of the eyes are on you, and I physically would hurt. I would just make a deal and tell them that if you talk, I will do all of the PowerPoint work. But in high school, like you, it was traumatic
Mm.
until I found the drama club.
Okay.
They let me in with open arms, and they were not judging, they were nurturing. So during the course of the year, there would be plays.
Mm.
They would encourage me to be a part of it. And so when I would tell them that I can't because I stutter, they told me, you can do anything that you put your mind to.
Mm.
And so during the course of the year, was in plays. I did prose and poetry, and it was amazing because doing all those plays, I was
Mm.
not Pedro. I was
Ah,
a different character, and that character did not stutter.
amazing, isn't it?
It is amazing because during the play, people were shocked.
Do you have
There,
any videos of those times?
this was back in the late '80s, so I don't know if 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 there's a video. Although I do have pictures.
Mm.
When the play was over, I would have people just come up to me. How come you didn't stutter? How are you doing this? You stutter. So I would always answer, well, the character that I was portraying didn't stutter. And so therefore I didn't stutter. And people were telling me to do that in my life. I said, I can't be another person other than Pedro. I know how to do Pedro. I know Pedro. I am Pedro. and
Yes,
Pedro's
sir.
and Pedro stutters. So I have to live my life to its truest form. And so they were just astounded that I won all of these awards in prose and poetry and in plays, and the drama club, it made me feel like I belonged.
Hmm. Did you know that Mr. Bean, Rowan Atkinson, he
Yes, I
used
love Mr.
acting to,
Bean.
yes, yes, he's an interesting guy, isn't he, Mr. Bean? I always wanted to get a mini after seeing Mr. Bean driving around. So I also had an experience in drama class, but unfortunately, my teacher didn't really get me to express myself or put myself in a speaking situation. We had like a drama class once a week in high school. I don't recall any situation where I had experience like you did, where your speech was at another level. I often wonder if I had tried acting, I too would have been able to become as famous as Mr. Bean. Maybe I can, as Rama Siva.
Of
Com.
course you can. You can do anything, Mr. Siva.
Yes, sir, I can. And you know what? There's something about the identity and the labeling. So I was labeled as a stutterer, and that was the identity I took forward in every walk of life. And Pedro, when you were on stage, you left the label of stuttering outside, and you were able to speak, act, and win awards. I think that's amazing. And you did that when you were in high school, right?
Right. Yes, sir.
So I'm sure if you are able to work on your identity, leave the stuttering identity behind. The speech I have now isn't the same as it was 10 years ago exactly, when I was in the British Embassy in Washington, D.C. I worked with the High Commissioner, the Ambassador, Nigel Scheinwald, in number 10 Downing Street. But because of my speech or my stutter or the lack of confidence, I didn't go up and introduce myself again to Nigel. Nigel is a Millwall football fan, soccer fan in the UK. So we spoke quite a bit when he worked at number 10. Simply due to the stuttering was out of control. My personality wasn't able to express itself. And that's the case with many stutterers because I know how it was. I lived with it for many, many years. And to be honest, it's only in the last 5 years that I've made significant progress to leave the identity of Rama Siva, the stutterer. Now it's Rama Siva, father, husband, brother, son, author, speaker, and many, many more things yet to come. But the label identity stutterer is off. It's been ripped off my forehead, and my psyche is gone somewhere else. So I'm sure your listeners who may want to examine themselves, because you, amazingly, you found in high school that you were fluent, you were having great speech just by portraying yourself as someone who's more confident, more assertive, not the Pedro stutterer. Like Rama Siva, stutterer at school was how I conducted myself. Wherever I went, I would see myself as a stutterer, and that's the way it happened. I stuttered. But over the last 5 years, I removed the identity, the label, stutterer, recovering stutterer, a person who has to work on his speech forever, like what I thought for the preceding 10 years while on the speech therapy program for recovering stutterers. These are all beliefs. Pedro. If you can work on your beliefs, you can, like you quite rightly said, be and do anything.
That is truly amazing, Mr. Siva. It is just truly inspirational. Do you have any advice for parents and teachers?
That's a great question, Pedro. I have a son who is 2 years, 7 months, and 4 days. And I am quite rightly or wrongly worried about how his future may or might not be if he starts to stumble or starts to stutter. What I found out from other parents, grandparents of children who may or may not stutter, people that I've mentioned, they stutter themselves. In their family situations, what they've done is they've let the child talk. So if the child is stumbling, let them stumble. Don't praise them, don't condone them, just let them speak. Give them all the time, give them the full attention so they can say what they want to say. And it's important not to praise, not to condone. So that is what they've told me, and that is what I will be doing with my son. And like you pointed out, doing drama class, doing expressive classes where you're not holding back, where you're able to shine. Those are the type of things which I hope to encourage with my son. And for teachers of any children who are stuttering in class, give them the time to speak. Don't send them direct to the speech therapy jail like I was. And I'm sorry to use a harsh word, but that's the way it was because I felt different. I think it was a Thursday, every Thursday I would be taken out of class and I would spend time with my mom and my speech therapist. There was something different about me. And over time, that grew and grew into the holding back personality that I was.
You bring up a good point. You had speech therapy on Thursdays, and so they would pull you out of class, and that happened to me as well. And the teacher would make a big deal out of it. And
Mm,
so, like you, when they would call me out, and they did
mm,
it not by a knock on the door,
mm,
but they did it over the speaker PA.
really. Hmm.
Then everybody would just look at me. Granted, I'm already anxious because I heard my name on the speaker.
What have you done wrong, Pedro?
Right, what have I done wrong? And so when I would go to the office, they would tell me it's time for speech therapy. So I completely felt like what you felt, being isolated, being singled out, going to speech therapy. However, speech therapy helped me a great deal. I had a wonderful, wonderful speech therapist, and so I am eternally grateful.
In my case, I'm eternally grateful to my speech therapist. She's quite famous in the UK. I know quite a number of people who stutter who have had her as a speech therapist. She's a wonderful, kind, loving speech therapist. But in terms of helping me not to stutter, I don't know if anyone in speech therapy who hasn't had a stutter themselves could help anyone. What's your take?
During all my years of speech therapy, I learned techniques, breathing techniques to help me if I had a block. And there was also a something called the cafe system.
Mm-hmm.
They would connect this, let me see, how would I describe it? This wire cord around my stomach,
Mm-hmm.
and that was connected to a PC, and they would tell me to take a deep breath. And when I did, I would look on the screen and there was a dot that had turned into a line, drawing the picture of a mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Going up the mountain, I would do my deep breathing,
Mm-hmm.
and just as I went over the top, that's when I would begin to speak.
Yes.
This was truly remarkable because when I first did it, I
Mm.
could I could hear myself speak without stuttering.
And how old were you?
I think I was in junior high. I was about 15 years old, and when I would practice it, it made me sound like a robot. For example, let me deep breathe, and then I will. You can hear what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so as I'm deep breathing and I'm exhaling, there is no block in my speech, and it's very fluent.
Wow, amazing, Pedro.
Yes, so I just had to practice it because when I would do it in public,
Mm.
I sounded like a robot. And so over the years, I just had to practice it. And so it helped me later in life when I was looking for work, which leads me to tell me about your career path. What led you to 10 Downing Street? Because I'm extremely curious.
Well, I was working at the Forensic Science Service in London in the drugstores, tapping away, doing data entry because I had a stutter, I couldn't speak. So I just found a job entering numbers into a computer system. And one day, Matthew walked in, and Matthew was a colleague, and he told me, or I told the group, that in the basement of number 10 Downing Street, there's a computer suite. In that moment, I thought to myself, wouldn't it be wonderful to work at number 10? This was in October 1998. I then left that dull and boring job and got a job in IT, an equally dull and boring job. I did that for a couple of years. I worked my ass off and I passed the Microsoft exams within 6 months because at that time it was quite prestigious to study and get those qualifications. In July 2000, I sent off two letters, one to number 10 and the other one to the Foreign Office, State Department in the UK. And number 10 replied saying that the Cabinet Office deal with the job vacancies. And I got a letter from the Cabinet Office saying there aren't any jobs. About 3 months on, I saw a job advert in Computer Weekly. This was in the heyday of computer jobs, pre-2001. All the magazines were filled with IT jobs. So I saw this job advert and I sent off for the application form. It was a 2-page form, very simple to fill, but the pay wasn't appealing, but the job was, or I thought it could be. So I filled out the form the night before it was due, sent it, and they called me for an interview. And my interview was at number 10 Downing Street. So I went in, knocked on the door, smiled, had a good look around because I didn't know if I would get the job. So fortunately, interviewers liked me or saw that I was a mug. Being a stutterer, they could not pay me as well. So they gave me the job and I was there for 7 years. I traveled the world. I went to Camp David, which is an amazing place. Went to Barbados, went to a lot of other countries. In terms of the stuttering, it didn't affect me getting the jobs, but I think it did hold me back in terms of progressing. Because as a person who is now congruent with himself and able to communicate effectively without having to really work so damn hard at speaking, Pedro, because I remember, even though I was on a program for recovering stutterers, I would have to do the breathing for 20 minutes every day. And like yourself, I would have to speak like a robot. And I didn't want to sound different. I already sounded different because I stuttered. So instead of speaking with stuttering, I was speaking like a robot. So I just fell back into my ways of holding back, stuttering, and that's the way I live my life. The only way that I could make a breakthrough was to embrace the fear. And what is the fear? The fear that the people will know my secret. What is my secret? I stutter. I really did not want people to know I stuttered. So subconsciously, I didn't want people to know I stuttered. And consequently, the subconscious would try its best not to speak. And when it was forced to speak, it would stutter, or it would just speak in the automatic default way. Like you quite rightly said, when you were acting, you have a different identity. I needed to transform Rama Siva into an identity of a confident, powerful, eloquent speaker. And that's what I have done in the last 2 or 3 years. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to use this powerful speaking way when I was working at number 10. I do regret some of my times there because I haven't been able to fully express myself, and I didn't fully enjoy my time there because holding back, Pedro.
Wow, you touched on a very important topic. And your work history is just phenomenal. Working at 10 Downing Street, going to Camp David, traveling all over the world. That is amazing. And you bring up a extremely important point that we have to work twice as hard.
Yes, yes. Due to the stutter, I felt that I had to prove myself even more. And you know what? When I went to Camp David, I was the first person in my IT team to go there. They chose me because I was technically competent and very good at my job. I was able to do a bit of telecoms and IT as well. So that's why they sent me to these places. And you're quite right saying that as a stutterer, I felt I had to prove myself in every situation because I stuttered.
What many people don't realize is what may take them 1 minute or two, for example, when they are setting up their voicemail, they can just quickly talk for 1 minute and do their voicemail. Well, it takes me an hour to actually do my voicemail because I have to go over it again and again and again and again because I want for everyone to hear every single word precisely and accurately. That way they could get back with me. And when people hear that, they are just astonished that it takes me 1 hour. But like you said, we have to work twice as hard than everybody else to do things that many people can do quite easily. And so you were talking about having low confidence and try and building that up. When I turned 40 years old, right now I'm 48, but
I'm 43.
aha. When I turned 40 years old, I made up my mind. I was done. I was done caring what other people thought about my stuttering. I did not care about my stuttering. I'm Pedro. Yes, I stutter, but it does not define me. It is not who I am. And so from that day onward, this huge, huge weight was just lifted.
Amazing.
100%. It was gone. From that day forward, I was a whole new person. I would go out and talk to people. I would go to restaurants
Mm.
and I would stutter, but I did not look around to see the facial expressions of the other people like I had done previously for
Mm.
over 43 years. I did that. I
Mm.
worried about what other people thought about my stuttering. But after I turned 40, I said, enough is enough. I am exhausted. Stuttering is exhausting because every organ in your body is tense from the time you wake up until the time that you go to bed. And working all day long,
Mm.
your body is tensed. And when you get home, you are just completely, utterly exhausted, and you don't want to talk to anybody. You don't want to talk on the telephone. You just want to sit on the couch in silence because all day long you were trying to speak, trying to get the words out. Some days are better than others. I have my good days, I have my bad days,
Mm.
but it's okay because I have embraced my stutter. And when I did that,
Mm.
it was the most uh, uh, amazing feeling because I could do things that I never thought that I could do.
Mm.
And the most important thing that I have learned is that when you surround yourself with positive people,
Mm-hmm.
there are people that I call vampires.
I call them energy vampires. You must
Yes,
have
yes.
read my mind.
th- they drain all of your energy.
I'm
They are always complaining. I don't have this, I don't have that.
glad.
Life is unfair. And so mainly because I'm from Texas, I call that crabs in a bucket. Because as you are trying to make your way out of the bucket, there is another crab right under you pulling you down. And those are the vampires. And so I got rid of every vampire near Pedro. And now I only surround myself with positive people. And it's phenomenal how all these positive people around you, they are supporting you. They are lifting you up and say, Pedro, you can do anything that you want. We are here to support you. We are here to lift you up. Don't let anybody tell you that you cannot do anything because we are here around you telling you that you can do anything that you want. And that, to me, was a game changer. That's when I told myself, I know there are other people out there who stutter who must feel that they are alone. And that's when I started my YouTube channel.
Mhm.
And then I started the podcast because I knew there are a lot of people who are not able to watch the videos. They would prefer to listen in their vehicle driving to work or
Mhm.
commuting. And so I created the podcast, and like you, I have received positive feedback from all over the world. And they are telling me keep doing what you are doing because I thought that I was all by myself. I thought I was alone.
Yes, Pedro, you're doing an amazing job, and thank you for having my stuttering life. And you're quite right. We as stutterers, by nature, we are negative. I'm talking about me 10 years ago. I had no awareness of myself that I'm connected to the universe, that my speech was a reflection of how I was. I was insecure, without any confidence, with countless limiting beliefs, which resulted in a lifetime of holding back and not speaking. What I want to share with my work with Stuttering Mind is that if you can speak in one situation without stuttering, then you can speak. And I had this thought when I was a child speaking to the cat. I didn't have a chance to test it out in public, acting like you did. But to be honest, Pedro, you're doing an amazing job. So keep on doing it and keep on believing. For me, the key was becoming conscious of the breathing. Like you rightly said, as you take an in breath and you go up the mountain, at the top, you are at the perfect moment. At that time, you start to speak. It may sound robotic for a while because you're retraining your subconscious mind to speak. Just like when you learn to drive, Pedro, or when you learn to ride a bicycle. You didn't get on the bicycle and start riding. Your mom and dad must have held you at the back to support you, and then finally they let you go, and then you find yourself you were wheeling across, and then you cycled. Same thing with driving. Exactly the same with speaking. We need to retrain our subconscious mind into accepting that we had a fear, or we still have a fear of stuttering. So the first part is to consciously become aware of your breathing. And then at the top of the mountain, which is the perfect moment, you start to speak. As a stutterer, I would try and speak when I was down the mountain. So I was already running out of air or gas. I would obviously block and I couldn't say a single word. Why? Because I wasn't consciously aware of the breathing process that is necessary. Without breathing, you can't speak and you'll die. Obviously, it's a subconscious process, but as stutterers, it's something that we need to take conscious control over for a certain point of time. When I'm speaking to you now, Pedro, I'm not speaking consciously every single word like in a robot. I'm speaking subconsciously, automatic. It becomes an automatic habit. And what you need to do is to build your inner confidence in your ability to speak. And how do you do that? You expand your comfort zone. You do things, you challenge yourself, and you observe yourself and think, oh, that went really well. What was I feeling? How were other people? And then you build the confidence to a level that you become bulletproof from the self-doubts which might creep in. Let me share a quick story with you. About a year or 15 months ago, I was in a carpet store and I had overheard the name of the guy doing the serving, George. But I wasn't sure if I should say, excuse me, or George. So in that moment, I had a hesitation. But I didn't beat myself about it. I didn't have to do contacts. I didn't have to go and phone someone and ask for George. I didn't have to overkill a word. That's what I went wrong previously. I just let it go. It's a stumble. Tony Blair stumbles. Prime Minister Tony Blair stumbles. Theresa May stumbling in the dark right now, trying to figure out Brexit.
You wrote a book titled Dreaming of Stuttering Freedom, the Stuttering Mind series, book 1. Can you talk a little bit about that book, please?
Yes, I wrote that book after I wrote my first book called Rich Thinking. After interviewing 20 people to write my first book, I realized that the stutter wasn't a big problem. Like yourself, I was interviewing people and then I was playing it back and thought, hey, I stumbled, but so what? I was really excited and I got the book published on Amazon and the feedback was amazing. And as a result, I went on BBC Radio and I decided to write a book specifically on stuttering. This book, I interviewed 4 people. One of them was a hypnotherapist, another one was a neuroscientist, another one was a Harvard brain surgeon, and then last one was a meditation expert. And while interviewing and editing the book, I had a spiritual transformation. I realized that I'm connected to the universe. I don't need to be the small me, worried about the stutter. I have to inspire people who stutter to believe in themselves that if they can speak in one situation, they can speak in any situation. It may take them a while, but if they believe, if they focus, if they work, if they're disciplined, if they're dedicated, they can replace the stuttering way of speaking. So in my book, I share my pain. I have a lot of pain, Pedro. I'm sad to say that the saddest pain was when I found out 10 years ago that the secret love of my life had passed away in 2006. That really shook me because I thought if I kept on going the way that I did, I probably wouldn't have anyone in my life. I wouldn't get married, wouldn't have children. I would be leading a sad and lonely life. So that was the catalyst for my journey of discovery. So in the book, I share that I went to Spain to learn Spanish. And while speaking Spanish, or trying to speak Spanish, because I was learning the language, I could see that I did not stutter because I had to slow down. I had to formulate. I had to think about the words because I wasn't fluent in Spanish. So I had to think of the words in English and then translate and speak the words. And then, intriguingly, Pedro, when I went to speak English with Spanish speakers, the English was great. Isn't it amazing? I was speaking English to Spanish speakers. And you know what? They asked me to slow down because they didn't understand English. It wasn't their first language. So they wanted me to slow down, to repeat words. They wanted to pronounce words. So it gave me a zone where I could practice my speaking in English. So my confidence was building up and up and up. I went traveling in South America. I went to all the other countries apart from Brazil and Venezuela. And I made sure that I spoke to as many people as I could. If I stumbled, I stumbled. I met my wife while traveling. She said my stutter was cute or sweet. To be honest, I felt really good because for the previous 30 odd years, stuttering wasn't cute. I hated, but I'd learned through doing conscious stuttering on purpose, being really aware of yourself. If you're really aware of yourself, then you can become totally free of the fear, because you can either be proactive in stuttering on purpose or reactive, stuttering out of control with all the facial movements, with all the tics, with all the eye closing, which I had, and the avoidance, which I was a king. I was known as Mr. Avoid.
You were the king over there, and then I was a king over here.
Indeed, we're two kings. So we need to have
Yes,
a
sir.
face-off.
You were talking about how learning a different language helped you.
Mm.
Learning for me when I was in the m- military and served during the Gulf War, they had me
Mm.
stationed in Izmir, Turkey, and
Oh my
so
God.
we were completely immersed in their country, which we had to learn their language. Now, I stutter in English,
Hmm.
I stutter in Spanish,
Hmm.
and what I had learned is I stutter also in Turkish. Though they were extremely, again, having people around you who are positive, it helped me to learn the language. That way, Pedro could eat in Turkey. He could
Mm.
have his own apartment in Turkey.
Great.
That
Pedro's
was
having a
one.
nice life.
Right. Yes, sir. Do you have another book in this series coming out?
Yes, awareness of stuttering freedom will be out at the end of this year, where I talk about beliefs and the underlying issues which has helped me become free from the stuttering mind. The stuttering isn't really the problem, Pedro. It was about my mindset of holding back, my mindset of not wanting to look and sound different. Being of Sri Lankan Tamil descent in the UK, at that time in the 80s, there weren't many Tamils around. So I obviously stood out. And having a stutter, made me stand out even more. I'm not too sure if circumstances led me to stuttering, but what I know for sure now is that the stuttering has made me a much better person in terms of being more empathetic to every type of person, irrespective of what challenges they may be facing. What I want to share with your listener is that the stutter you have now will not be the same in 10 years or 20 years' time. At the age of 18, I was convinced I would stutter forever. I was convinced. Why? Because I saw other stutterers who were stuttering and were leading unsuccessful lives. But at the age of 43, I know that the stuttering can be left behind. And I want to share this message with your listeners that it's important to believe in yourself and surround yourself with positive people. Get rid of energy vampires. They'll only suck the blood out of you and you will end up dead anyway. Believe in yourself and your ability to really look within yourself and know that you can be and do anything that you really want. It is within you. You just need to have a dream. If you dream of becoming a podcaster like Pedro, do it. I'm now inspired by Pedro, and I'm going to get my YouTube videos converted into an audio series and put them on a podcast. Because, like he said, there are people who prefer listening to them in the car. So, whatever your dream is, do it. If you want to become an actor like Bruce Willis, Emily Blunt, Samuel L. Jackson. Amazing, amazing, amazing people. We can all do it.
You are truly, truly an inspiration, Mr. Siva.
Thank you, Pedro. And so are you, sir. Because you know what? Tell the truth. I wouldn't have done a YouTube channel 10 years ago. Why? I was embarrassed of myself, about the way I spoke and my life. It was shocking. What you said about stuttering is exhausting. It was killing me. I was working from 9 to 5 in most days, 9 to 7, 9 to 10. But when I got home, I just crashed out. Ate my pasta, watched a couple of hours TV, went to bed. Repeat, like Homer Simpson's does, eating donuts. So I wouldn't have done that, Pedro. And I'm inspired by you because what you're doing now, openly sharing your story while you're on the journey, I believe within the next 2 years, your speech will be at a level where you are very, very pleased with it. It doesn't matter if you stutter or stumble. Everyone stumbles. That's the point which people who stutter don't realize. We are so introverted. We look inside ourselves and think we are the only people who stutter. We are the only people who don't do things. Public speaking is the number one fear of most adults. A lot of stutterers do public speaking because they know that they can speak in front of large people. In fact, on my first day video on this famous speech therapy program for recovering stutterers, I didn't block or stutter. I may have looked very uncomfortable, but I didn't block or stutter like I had done. Why? Because I was in a zone where other people were at my level. I wasn't afraid of them. They were all stutterers, recovering stutterers. So you're doing a great job, Pedro. Keep it up.
Thank you, sir. Now, where can people find you if they want to learn more about Rama Siva?
You can find me at Stuttering Mind on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, Snapchat, every other social media method going out there. Just look for Stuttering Mind. I'm there. But the best place to get me is YouTube or Instagram. I love interacting with people, so please do reach out to me. And I hope you'll be inspired to believe in yourself and exterminate all those energy vampires. Get out, get out. Anyone who is making you feel down, throw them out of your life. It may not be easy, but you need to have some self-respect for yourself. Believe in yourself. You deserve better. And you know what? The world is full of positive people. Pedro is one of them. And I'm inspired to listen to his podcasts. And I will be joining being a podcaster very soon. So check me out on a podcast near you.
Thank you, Mr. Siva. We'll post the links in the description of this podcast. And to recap, what you were telling me is that stuttering taught you empathy, and what stuttering has also taught me is strength and courage, knowing that I can go on day by day. If I have a stutter, oh well, life goes on. And stuttering has taught me, like you, how to be empathetic, and that has been a valuable trait that has helped me tremendously in life. So I want to thank you for being a guest on my Stuttering Life. You are a true inspiration, and I can't wait for your next book because I will be the first one to buy it on Amazon. And so I know, I can feel it, that this will not be our last conversation and that we will talk again.
Thank you so much, Pedro, for having me on My Stuttering Life. I really loved hearing your side of the story and sharing mine. And I look forward to connecting with you very soon.
There you have it. If you like this podcast, head on over to Apple iTunes and subscribe, rate, and review. You can follow me on all of my social media with My Stuttering Life. Thank you again, and we will talk again.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.